Greens brothers, what the frack? We're here to talk about Blood Angels Tank Busters. In the new codex, the Death Company lost a load of their power fists. Sangre Guard units are smaller, so we need to probably double down on adding a little bit of armour to our list to pop open those enemy transports to deal with their long-range firepower. So this isn't too much focused on the new Blood Angels Codex as much as the Space Marine Codex, but let's talk about what Space Marine vehicles we can attach to our Blood Angels lists to make our lists the best they possibly could be. So thanks for being here this week, and if we are just meeting, my name is John, the Blood Angels Commander, and the goals for this video are going to be pretty simple, right? We're going to evaluate all the good ranged firepower we can bring in a Blood Angels army. We're going to discuss the survivability of each of these shooting options. We're going to figure out how many points of your list you should be using to balance your army or optimize your build if you are including some shooting units. And then I'm going to share my experience as someone who has basically played this for like 7 years now and finally got a GT win with 3 tank busters in my list. So let's talk about everything. Let's dive into it. Let's talk about the Ballistus Dreadnought first. This guy just dropped down to 130 points. In the early game, he has some baked-in rerolls. So basically at the start of the game, when all the enemies are on full health, you're going to reroll your hits kind of natively. So it's when they're not below half strength. It's a bit of a weird double negative there, but just be aware it is not below half strength. You're going to get to reroll your hits. He has some versatility in that he's basically got like a couple of las cannons. We also have a couple of strength 10 crack missiles. We do have a little bit of versatility when it comes, because we've got this strength 5 frag, which is 2d6 blast, and there's some things that's actually pretty good against. Like if you're thinking about playing like Orc Horde and every unit has 20 guys in it, well, you're instantly getting 4 extra shots there before you roll your 2d6. So there is some interesting things there. He has strength 9 melee for Blood Angels with his armoured feet, and he would be getting 6 attacks at strength 9 melee. He is also T10 for tank shock, and the majority of his guns are 48 inches. Yes, you get a couple of Stormbolters with you in 12, but do we really care about a couple of Stormbolters? Probably not. So pretty good unit, I think, for 130 points. A bit of everything. Like, you bit of shooting, then you could charge, then you could tank shock, then you could do some melee, and you've got OC4, which is really not bad at all. 2-up save as well. The Ballistus Dreadnought 130 points. I was playing it at 140, I thought it was good. I think it's good at 130 for sure. Alright, let's talk about the Gladiator Lancer. It's probably the most accepted meta pick, and the reason that you pick it is because of the Lancer Laser Destroyer, which is a Strength 14 AP4 weapon. One of the best weapons in the Space Marine arsenal, actually, with D6 plus 3. Each time you select to shoot, you can reroll 1 hit, 1 wound, and 1 damage roll. So a lot of reliability baked into there as well, and it is heavy. So if you get to stay still, you are hitting on 2s. With that 1 reroll, you're probably going to end up with 2 hits. Strength 14 means you're probably going to wound on 3s, again a reroll, and then for your damage roll, D6 plus 3 with a reroll. So it's pretty good. AP4 is very rare for Space Marines. Solid number of wounds, 12. And it actually has, like, I want to say significant anti-chaff fire. This may be a bit of a lie. It has some, right? You get 2 Stormbolters, you get Stubber, you got a Rocket Pod. I mean, it could kill probably like 5 models, maybe if they've got 1 wound each or something. So some chaff firepower. Smoke available here. I suppose it's worth noting the Ballistus Dreadnought does not have smoke. The Primaris chassis of Dreadnoughts, for some reason, never got given smoke launchers, but they do have a slightly better save. So 12 wounds on both of these. Then we move into the Vindicator. And the Vindicator is obviously a firstborn tank, but it has been very, very good this edition. It was good in Gladius for Blood Angels. A lot of people stopped taking it. Some of the weaknesses of Gladius have been negated by Liberator Assault Group. So you're going to take, basically, if you've got 2 of these, because I think most of the time when people take Vindicators, you take 2, you're going to average a minimum of 10 Strength 14 hits, right? Which is pretty crazy. The main cannon is D6 plus 3, so if you roll a 1 there, that's 4, and you would have your Hunter Killer Missile as well. So that's 5, minimum 5 shots. So if you put both in reserve, or you manage to get both to target the same enemy unit, that's 10 Strength 14 hits. That can swing all the way up to 22 Strength 14 hits. Is that right? No, 20. because you could roll another 5 on both dice. Yeah. So you can get 20 strength 14 hits in turn 1. After turn 1, I guess you're 18 strength 14 hits. So if you swing good on this, in my experiences when I play the Vindicator, I always seem to roll 5s and 6s for the number of shots. When you swing like that, this tank is kind of amazing. It's a great Oath of Moment user, right? Like, you use Oath of Moment on what it's hitting, and then it's just a phenomenal amount of strength 14 hits. It can shoot its blast weapon in engagement range. It can deal with basically monsters, vehicles, and elites, right? Because against monsters and vehicles, it's a lot of strength 14 hits. Against elites, basically, like, if you imagine elite has 3 wounds, then basically when you get to the wound stage here, I mean, I feel like they're going to fail some saves if you had, 9 strength 14 hits. You just basically, if every time you roll a 3 up, you kill a Terminator or something like that, or maybe, what are 8 bound these days, 4 up? So, like, 50-50 chance to kill, like, really strong elites every time they fail a save. Toughness 11 is somewhat meaningful breakpoint when you are being shot. Like, some enemies have weapons that are strength 10. So toughness 11 can actually mean it's kind of more difficult to wound this. It's also better for tank shock, and why would you not want a tank shock with 11 dice? I guess it's not too bad. And it's got an R2 save as well, and potential armour of contempt and potential cover. So it's a good tank at 175 points. The only thing that lets it down is a 24-inch range. So if you can work around that, I think you're in good state with Vindicator. Vindicators, again, have smoke, and I think they're a fun tank to play. If you've never played one, this is probably the edition they've been the most strongest in. Let's talk about the Predator. Let me move myself down a tiny bit. The Predator Destructor. So this was a favourite of mine, right? And I think the reason this is a favourite of mine is because I feel like it is versatile. It's not totally going to deal with enemy tanks, but I mean, it does have a couple of las cannons, and the autocannon, if we talk about rhinos, for example, the autocannon is at a breakpoint for rhinos. For example, they wound a rhino on 4s. You actually get rapid fire 2 here, so basically you could potentially get 6 shots. So you could do as much as 18 damage to a rhino with the autocannon wounding on 4s. So it's not the worst into something like that. It includes the hunter killer missile as well. It has amazing AP when you shoot infantry, right? That autocannon becomes AP 2 against infantry. Your las cannons actually become AP 4 into infantry. And your Stormbolter actually gets a pip of AP into infantry because it improves all your weapons armor characteristics of 1. So even your Stormbolter can kill like a Terminator or take a wound off them, for example. I think it's got a solid amount of damage at 48 inches. 4 autocannon shots, 2 las cannons, that hunter killer missile early in the game, and it gets better as the game goes on, because at some point later in the game you're going to get within 24 inches. It moves pretty quickly, 10 inches, so it's pretty easy to get from that 48 in a turn or two to suddenly get into 24. And then when you actually start shooting that autocannon into elites, AP2 is sort of the perfect number to take those elites into their invuln save. And then it's 6 shots. And I actually would use Oath of Moment this quite a lot, and I would potentially have 2 destructors, because that's what I was running to the tournament I played at recently. I basically have 2 autocannons pepper into unit of Terminators. That would be 12 shots, rerolling hits, and then wounding on 3s, AP2. Statistically, we can kill like 4 or 5 Terminators a turn with that. Sometimes I just throw the las cannons into the Terminators as well if I've already killed the enemy armor, right? Like, I think the Predator Destructor is a pretty versatile tank. It's not going to be quite as good shooting enemy tanks as the other choices that we just looked at, but I don't think it's a bad tank by any means necessary. Also has access to smoke, and until literally this balance patch where the Ballistus went down 10 points, this was the cheapest one at 130 points. So, it's also a classic model, and I've done a video on just the Predator Destructor before, so you can check that out. I want to talk about some other notable mentions. Right, we've got Centurion Devastators. They were very good with their basically 3 twin las cannons and then a bunch of strength 9 AP 2 damage 3 rockets. Their weakness was that they could not fall back and shoot, so if they were ever in combat, they were kind of screwed for Blood Angels in Sons of Sanguinius, but that has been removed by Liberator Assault Group, right? So like there is a stratagem in Liberator Assault Group when we can fall back and shoot. Centurion Devastators, they did go up in points. I think they were 175, but I think when they were at 175 they were arguably the best choice, because they get some native rerolls to hit, and then they get all their las cannons are twins as well, so they were probably the most damaging unit and possibly the best choice at 175. They went up 10 points, and I think they're still really good. We just haven't seen many Blood Angels players go for them yet, but they might come back. I guess we'll find out. We also have Land Raiders with 4 las cannons and multi-melta. It's kind of like the best save out of all the marine tanks. It's got toughness 12, but you're paying around 40 points for the transport capacity. So if you aren't using it, there's possibly better choices. I think the repulsor is more of a gun platform. It could be useful in some situations. I'd advise putting the twin las cannon and the las talon on it, but on its own, again, it's not going to have that much impact, but isn't the worst thing in the world. And I've got numbers to back up everything I'm saying. We're going to dive into the numbers in the second part of the video. We also have the Executioner in there. I felt when I've played it, it's possibly the most anticlimactical offering, right? The plasma isn't very meta these days. Most of the time it's wasted AP. The laser destroyer really wants you to sit still because it's got heavy. It's got limited transport capacity. I feel honestly it's a bit of a confused tank. I'm not entirely sure what it's trying to do, but I've got some numbers on it that might interest you a little bit later. And then the Annihilator. Not many people take the Predator Annihilator. I rarely see these in Marine forces, right? They're 30 points cheaper than the Lancer. If you ran 3, you essentially get 9 las cannons just shot per turn. They're on the same toughness 10, 11 wound platform, which I don't think's bad for 130 points. And you also get potential rerolls on all the damage ones because that's what the Predator Annihilator does. So 9 las cannons, 390 points. If you're sitting at 48 inches away and you're just peppering 9 las cannons a turn and the enemy can't return your firepower, it's actually pretty decent. And it's one of the ways that you can actually win games with Blood Angels, because if you have a couple of these range units that can sit back and pepper the enemy with firepower and they have to be ignored while while your opponent deals with all your jump infantry, that's a solid tactic. It works really, really well. And if we can keep that range support to a very reasonable point cost of our army, like basically somewhere in the region of like less than 20%, then I think we're in a really good state for Blood Angels. So before we go any further and get into the maths and we talk about what units, remember my name is John, the Blood Angels Commander. I'm here every week. Please consider liking, subscribing, and if you want to get notified every time I put up a new video, click the bell, click the all notification buttons, and then you'll get notified each time a new video comes out. Right. Let's talk about the survivability. So this is the number of successful hits, right, that would need to kill a Ballistus Dreadnought. So if I had a Power Fist, I need to hit the Ballistus Dreadnought 36 times with a Power Fist. The reason being that then, of those 36, I would wound on 5s. So basically we would have 12 wounds. 12 wounds would mean to need to make 12 saves on a 4-up, because Power Fists are AP2. I would statistically fail half of those, which is 6. So that would be where I lose my 6 times 2, 12 wounds, and I die. So, Ballistus Dreadnought, 130 points. I'm not going to touch on every single number here, but we're going to try and look at some trends. So if we look at Power Fists, we can see like the Ballistus Dreadnought is better than the Gladiator and the Predator. It's similar actually to the Vindicator and the Repulsor. So the Ballistus is almost as survivable as a toughness 12 Repulsor against Power Fists. Interesting. Land Raider is the winner, but Land Raider is also the most expensive. If we look at like a Psy Cannon from a Grey Knight Nemesis Dread Knight, 16 wounds to kill the Ballistus Dreadnought, which again is more than the Lancer and more than the Predator. A little bit worse against the Vindicators. Land Raider and Repulsor come out on top again. If we look at las cannons, 6.7 for the Ballistus, again better than the Lancer, better than the Predator, similar again to the Vindicator. Repulsor and Land Raider are a little bit ahead because las cannon toughness 12 on these two is like the break point. And then if we look against enemy Gladiator tanks, so an enemy's got that strength 14 AP4, Ballistus survives 3.6 shots, which again is the same as the Vindicator. Lancers and Predators a little bit weaker, Repulsors and Land Raider are ahead again. So like as the cheapest, or one or equal the cheapest, 130 points on the Ballistus, 130 points on the Predator, the Ballistus is actually in a great place for survivability. He is keeping up in most cases. Maybe not against the Psy Cannons, but there is always break points between weapons, right? He's keeping up in most cases with the Vindicator tank, and we know Vindicators are very... I would say Vindicator has a good level of survivability with that 2-up save and that toughness 11. So the Ballistus is doing fairly well in survivability. The Predator and the Lancer are kind of like the weakest choices here, and I suppose that makes sense. They have got a worse save, and they do have the same toughness. But it's just interesting to know that, like, if we were just trying to have something cheap and durable, then, and I guess the Ballistus has good OC as well, actually. So Ballistus is in a very good spot for survivability. Combo that with the fact that it's the best in melee, right? It gets the most attacks in melee, the most strength in melee, the best weapon skill in melee. It's actually pretty good for tank shock. So Ballistus Dreadnought kind of comes out maybe a bit like a bandit for survivability. He did really well with this 10-point drop. I think the Lancer and Predator are kind of fine. Like, we know they're not super survivable, but they are cheap and they offer decent platforms. The Vindicator has a little bit more survivability, but it needs to be a little bit closer. And then Repulsor and Land Raider are interesting, like, in terms of, like, you know, if you took the cheap Repulsor for 180 points, it's kind of a little bit more survivable than a Vindicator, but not much. And then the Land Raider, again, a little bit more survivable, but not massive. Like, the Land Raider, like I said, is playing a bit of a tax for the fact it can carry people, and it's also got the assault ramp, which I think is less relevant now for Blood Angels. Still relevant, right? So how many points? Like, one of the most popular combos I'd say at the moment is the double Gladiator Lancer, right? 320 points. This keeps things nice and cheap, provides solid anti-tank firepower. And if we look at the last slide, it's fairly obvious why people recommend using two, right? Because, like, people often take one Gladiator Lancer. I think that's always kind of the wrong choice. And remember, this is the column from the Lancer's damage. So if you have one Gladiator Lancer, you are not going to successfully be able to do 3.6 wounds to Ballistus Dreadnought, so you leave it alive. You're not going to be successfully able to do 3 wounds to Gladiator Lancer, you leave it alive. But whereas if you have 2 Gladiator Lancers, then you could arguably kill a Ballistus Dreadnought, kill a Gladiator Lancer, kill a Vindicator, kill a Predator. You could damn near kill a Repulsor. Like, you'd be leaving the Repulsor on a minute amount of wounds, and you'd be leaving a Land Raider on a minute amount of wounds. So it's very obvious why people take 2 Lancers, right? Like, every week people submit me lists with 1 Lancer in their list. Don't do it. It's rubbish. I don't like it. So if you have 1 Lancer, the way I see it is you will hit the enemy's Ballistus Dreadnought in their backfield and you'll take half its wounds. Then they kill your Lancer. And then what happens? Well, you've paid 160 points to do half the wounds to that Ballistus Dread. Now they are going to sit at 48 inches away from you for the rest of the game and never get closer. And you've got literally nothing for your 160 points, right? So basically, yeah, if you manage to both hit and do some wounds, you do sort of devastating damage with those double Gladiator Lancers. So it makes sense. This is a very popular choice. If you are struggling to figure out what fire support you should be running with Blood Angels, you could very simply just put 2 Gladiator Lancers in your list. You could do a lot worse than that, right? From a personal point of view, I am actually commissioning my second Gladiator Lancer. Probably as we speak, my friend Mike is painting it up over on his Twitch channel. So I will have 2 before too long, because I think that will be a good option. Maybe I'm not running it right now, but I think it's going to be a good option for a while. You know, like the idea about buying Vindicators and Predators right now is a little bit risky because they are firstborn tanks. We did lose access to a crap load of firstborn units in 10th edition. That might continue in 11th edition. Nobody really knows. So how many points could we push, right? I think we can probably push as high as 450 points, right? I've seen some interesting lists, right, where people do, like, I've seen a Repulsor with a Ballistus Dreadnought and a Lancer. That's 470. I would try not to go any higher than that. But I do have damage numbers for the Repulsor later, so if we look at, like, a Ballistus plus a Lancer plus a Repulsor, we can actually kill quite a lot of stuff at quite long range, right? And I think that's kind of the point, is, like, if you're like, let's say you go first, and the enemy have 1 tank you can see, what are you going to use your Oath of Moment on as a Blood Angels player in turn 1? None of your melee is going to be in combat. I mean, maybe you could luck out and be able to make a charge with, like, 1 unit of Assault Intercessors with jump packs, but for the most part, the way I've played it is I will use my turn 1 Oath of Moment to put it on an enemy tank 48 or so inches away, and when I was doing this, I had this combo down here. Well, no, I didn't have any combo on the screen. I actually had 2 Predator Destructors and I had a Ballistus Dreadnought. I just threw all their firepower into that 1 enemy tank 48 inches away. And more often than not, with the Hunter Kill missiles in turn 1 and a little bit of luck from Oath of Moment, I would kill something. Or I'd do devastating amount of damage to something 48 inches away. So it's a good use of Oath of Moment, which you don't really get all that much use of in turn 1. So I think if you have a Repulsor, a Ballistus, and a Lancer, and you can use Oath of Moment turn 1, and you can get all of them to hit an enemy tank, well, we'll look at the numbers later. It's going to do a lot of damage, right? So as someone who's run these combined arm lists for a while, I think trying to be as efficient as possible. So we still load up our list with lots of jump infantry, death company, sangre guard, jump intercessors. You know, like, we still use the core that is Blood Angels, but we just put like two or three niggly annoying things in the backfield that can stand on objectives and just shoot every turn, right? So I want to jump into some damage output math based on the combos we've seen recently, right? And these are the combos that I see every week that get submitted to me to review on the Army List show. And there's quite a lot of combos, so we're not going to be able to dive into all of them because I was up till like 1 a.m. making this slides last night. But we are going to be able to look at quite a few combos, and honestly, there's like 15. So I'm going to try and choose some of the more popular combos, and we're going to do some maths where we're basically shooting at. Originally, I started at T10 and 12 enemies, but I actually expanded this out. So we're going to shoot at like lots of different enemies, and here are some of the combos we're going to use. We're going to check that double lancer. We're going to check a lancer and a ballistus dread, because some people are starting to look at that as a cheaper way of doing this for 290 points. We're going to look at maybe like a couple or even 3 ballistus dreadnoughts. We're going to look at a few predator destructors. We're looking at vindicators. We're actually going to look at even more, because like I said, sometimes when I'm doing these maths videos, they start to grow arms and legs, and I want to just compare everything so that people have like a full picture of everything. And sometimes I also want to do it for myself, because when I actually, like, I've been playing the Predator Destructor and the Ballistus Dreadnought now, and the Repulsor actually, for probably the last 6 months, and I kind of have a feel in my head of how good each unit is, but I don't actually know the raw maths, so this actually helps me out as well. So let's talk about damage profile, and when we're talking about damage profile, we're just going to include their main guns. So in the case of like if they've got Stormbolters or Stubbers or even multi-meltas, right? Anything that's basically not the big range, right? We're talking about the big range stuff here. Then I'm ignoring it. So because like, yeah, even the Vindicator, we just look at the main cannon, even though the main cannon is the same distance as a Stormbolt, or I didn't do the math for the Stormbolt, or I'm just looking at its big Demolisher cannon, okay? So we're going to shoot like tactical warsuits, impulsors, armigers, land raiders, and castellans, and we basically work out how much damage on average using no rerolls here, right? Like I didn't factor in any rerolls from the Ballistus Dreadnought. For the Lancer, I did factor in the reroll of 1 hit and 1 wound. I didn't factor in the 1 reroll of damage because I actually don't know how to do that in my head. Or I don't know how to do that, so I didn't do that. For the Vindicator, I did no rerolls. For the Predator, I did no rerolls. So here's your damage output, and this basically tells you, like, this is the points you pay, this is the damage they will do. So we can just compare, right? Ballistus Dreadnought against a Tactical Warsuit, 5.4. The Lancer is a little bit better. The Vindicator is the best choice. The Predator is right up there with the Ballistus Dreadnought. Against an Impulsor, so if you want to kill an Impulsor, which has 11 wounds, you'd need 3 Ballistus Dreadnoughts, right? Based on these maths. The Ballistus Dreadnought potentially gets some baked-in rerolls to hit, and you can use Oath of the Moment, so you can buff these. So arguably with Oath of the Moment, you could maybe kill an Impulsor with 2 Ballistus Dreadnoughts. The Lancer actually struggles a bit into the Impulsor because the 5-up invuln loses a bunch of its AP. The Vindicator, again, is the most damaging choice. The Predator isn't too far behind the Lancer and the Ballistus Dreadnought. Against an Armiger, again, the Lancer slightly better than the Ballistus Dreadnought. Again, the Armiger has an invuln save. The Vindicator is still top. The Predator is a little bit even further behind here because I guess his autocannon starts hitting a breakpoint where it only wounds on 5s. Against enemy Land Raider, the Ballistus is not good against Land Raiders. You can see that. The Lancer is literally double the damage. It's worth saying the Lancer would actually get improvements to hit as well if you used Oath of the Moment here as well. The Vindicator against is the best. That Strength 14 really coming clutch, I guess, and the Predator is kind of bad against Land Raiders as well. And then if we go into Night Castellans, the Ballistus is pretty low. The Lancer is a solid winner here. The Vindicator does very good, but again, it needs to be in close. The Predator is kind of weak, right? So like the Ballistus can get rerolls, and that would improve its hit chance by 22%, which would basically almost equate to 22% more damage because you're hitting more often, you're wounding more often, they're saving less. The Lancer can get +1 to hit if it is stationary, which actually increases its hit chance by like 16%. The Vindicator gets a once per game hunter-killer missile, which I put the values for down here, but it's half the range of the other options. The Predator is much better dealing with elite infantry, and once per game it has the same hunter-killer missile. Its autocannon becomes rapid-fire 2 if you get within half range later in the game. So the Predator, you know, like, if we're trying to pop open, like, rhinos or impulsors, like, if you're trying to pop open transports, the Predator does pretty okay, you know, for the points you pay. But I guess if you start having to go into those higher toughness targets, the Predator struggles the most. But the Predator is versatile, in my opinion, in that, like, I play Death Guard a lot. They have Terminators that are a real ball ache for Blood Angels to deal with. The Predator is very good at killing Death Guard Terminators. The flat 3 damage, the AP2 is kind of perfect, right? So one of the big things about, like, Death Company and Sangre Guard, led by Dante, and Blade Guard Veterans to an extent, is, like, all 3 of these squads obtain rerolls to hit, thus freeing Oath of Moment for a ranged fire support. So, like, my list at the moment, and my tournament lists I've run recently have very much focused on Death Company, Sangre Guard led by Dante, and Blade Guard Veterans. And all 3 of those squads are not going to need my Oath of Moment. So I can Oath of Moment to improve the hit rolls by all these vehicles almost every turn. Not every turn, but almost every turn. Oath of Moment typically increases your hit rate from 66% to 88%. So it would increase overall damage by like 22%. So like if we just, for example, like I talked about like the fact that I ran 2 Predators and a Ballistus Dreadnought, and I had to go into like a toughness 12 Orc wagon. Well, you can see here that like the 2 Predators and the Ballistus Dreadnought without any rerolls would be doing something like that would be 5 plus 2.8, so 7.8 plus 2 hunter killer missiles, which would be about 10 damage before you factor in Oath of Moment, increase hit rate by like 22%. So basically, like, I could do like 12 damage to a Land Raider with Oath of Moment with my hunter killer missiles at 48 inches turn 1. Yes, it doesn't kill a Land Raider, but it possibly brackets it. And when I played in a tournament, I played against an Orc Battle Bus, which is a toughness 12 vehicle. It has a worse save than Land Raider. I think it's a 3-up, 5-up on the Orc Battle Bus. And I did actually kill that at like 48 inches turn 1, and he had to unload his Mega Knobs in his own deployment zone, which was actually really impactful overall in that game. So having 390 points of shooting in my list, I didn't take like Tech Marines or anything else like that. So I did 390 points of shooting, a lot of melee and some scoring units. Worked out really, really well, and being able to at least use that Oath of Moment like 3 times out of 5, probably. Like, I felt like I juggled my Oath of Moment. I either gave it to the tanks target, or gave it to the target for like assault intercessors with jump packs, because assault intercessors with jump packs don't do a horrendous amount of damage, and Oath of Moment is actually very valuable on those guys. So I kind of juggled it, but I was definitely able to use it on the tanks targets multiple times, and I felt that is pretty strong. I even sometimes actually used it on the Dante's target, even though he is hitting on 2s. Sometimes I was just like, I just want Dante to hit. Dante and the Sangre Guard we're going to hit every single time, so we're going to hit on 2s, reroll 1s from Oath. Why not? Sometimes it can be valuable, right? Okay, so let's talk about some of these combos. And what I did over here was I just did some quick maths for the Ballistus Dreadnought and the Predator into a Lancer. Or a toughness 10 3-up save vehicle, because I realized I didn't have that over here, and this is why my slides grew arms and legs. So we talk about 2 Lancers. What do they do, right? They do 9 damage into an Armiger or a Castellanite. They do about 11 damage into Land Raider, and if they were to shoot an enemy Lancer, if they both shoot it, they will kill. And I put the numbers of kills in red, so they will kill a Gladiator tank at, you know, across the other side of the battlefield. So this is why I don't recommend 1 Gladiator tank. If I went first, I got 2 Gladiators, I'll just blow up your 1 Gladiator. Your Gladiator is now doing nothing. You just spent 160 points on nothing. If you did a Gladiator and a Ballistus Dreadnought, you'll do 8.8 to an Armiger, you'll do 8.4 to Land Raider. You'll actually leave the enemy Gladiator tank, if they had one, on statistically 0.4 of a wound. But basically that means like, it's sort of like, it'll be on like 1 wound or it'll be dead. So if you have 2 Ballistus Dreadnoughts, you'll do about 10 damage to an enemy Lancer, 5 damage to Land Raider, 8 damage to an Armiger. I mean, it's not bad for 260 points. If they are unable to return fire and these guys are able to shoot every turn, then that's actually not too bad. And I guess this is why I was watching Art of War's battle tier list for Blood Angels, and Jack, who is one of the best Blood Angels players in the world, actually said that he felt like 3 Ballistus Dreadnoughts in Blood Angels now was totally valid. And I can see why, right? Like, they're cheap, they're going to OC4 in objectives, they tank shock, they shoot. It's not bad at all. Alright, let's talk about some other combos. The 2 Vindicator tanks, if they're going to go into an armature, they're just going to kill it, because Vindicator tanks are awesome, but they lack range. Against the Castellan, they're going to do 13 damage. Against Land Raider, they're going to do 13 damage. Against a Gladiator tank, they're just going to kill it. And then this is what I ran at the tournament. So if I go into an armature, I'm going to leave it on 1 wound. If I went into Land Raider, and bear in mind I didn't factor in Hunter Killer missiles and didn't factor in oaths or any rerolls in all these calculations, so you do get more damage if you start factoring in oath and Hunter Killer missiles and stuff like that. 8 damage to Land Raider, or if, like I said, like when I came up against an enemy that had a single Gladiator tank, I actually felt good about that matchup, because like, so if I commit my Oath of Moment and my 2 Hunter Killer missiles and my Destructor and my Ballistus Dreadnought into an enemy Gladiator tank, I will kill it in turn 1 and just lift it off the board. And now if they don't have any fire, like if they just took a single Gladiator, my Predator and Ballistus Dreadnought will just shoot indiscriminately for the rest of the game, probably into an Oath of Moment target, and they will clean up way more than, well, at the tournament the Ballistus hadn't gone down 10 points, so 400 points. They will clean up way more than 400 points if they're free to just shoot every single turn. So this was I actually still really like this combo, but having done all the maths now, part of me is thinking I should go the other way. I should have 2 Ballistus Dreadnoughts and 1 Predator Destructor. Just because the benefits right now on the maths tell me that the Ballistus Dreadnought is awesome. But then sometimes the Destructors into elite infantry, they are really, really good. It's hard to, I don't know. But I feel like based on the maths, I should switch. I should go 2 Ballistus, 1 Destructor. Anyway, I also put the numbers for the Repulsor down here as well, just because we had that interesting combination where someone did a Ballistus, a Lancer, and a Repulsor. And a Repulsor actually does okay. It's similar damage to the Ballistus Dreadnought, and it makes sense. It's kind of got those 2 strength 10 shots, and then it's got that 1 twin-linked strength 12 shot. So the fact it does very similar damage to the Ballistus Dreadnought makes sense. Has a little bit more toughness, has the transport capacity. It has a good transport capacity actually now with 14. So if you are going to use that transport capacity, then I think the Repulsor is a pretty good choice. You're probably only paying like 30 points. It's probably maybe more efficient than a Land Raider in terms of transport capacity or cost per transport capacity, right? So I've got a bonus slide to show you after this one, but let's talk about some conclusions from what I've seen so far, right? The Ballistus Dreadnought is durable, it's cheap, it's very decent against undamaged enemies, and overall I just think it seems like a really solid choice. The Lancer gives you that best long-range fire support. It's really strong against enemies without an invuln. But just please do not run one of them. Please do not submit me an army list where you've only got one of them. I will tell you, I suppose if you have one of them plus another tank, I'm okay. But if your only unit of armor is the Lancer, get another unit of armor. It doesn't work as a singular thing. The Vindicators are devastating. They lack range. They're a little bit more pricey, but they are flat, like hands down, these are doing the most damage. And these are doing the most damage on averages. So if they ever spike like high numbers of shots, they are ridiculous. The Predator Destructor is the poorest anti-tank choice, but it does excel in those other areas like elite infantry, like I said, and it doesn't do bad at killing transports. I think that's probably where I draw the line that I actually think it's okay. Most enemy transports are less than toughness 9, right? Or toughness 9 and less. An autocannon is actually fine against toughness 9. It's got that Hunter Killer missile in the early game. You can use the Oath of Moment. So although it's not the greatest anti-tank choice, I do think it is still a good choice. I actually still think I prefer it to the Predator Annihilator, but I guess like the Annihilator isn't a bad choice either. I mean, if we compare it to the Ballistus Dreadnought, you know, like what did the Ballistus Dreadnought get? The 2 strength 12 hits and the 2 strength 10 hits. The Annihilator just has 3 strength 12 hits and one of them is twin linked, so it's going to end up very similar numbers to the Repulsor, maybe actually a tiny bit higher. Because you get to reroll ones on a bad damage roll. So, Predator Annihilator not mentioned there, but a solid choice as well. If you want to take it and you want something to be cheap. I think from the numbers, right, it's super obvious. While people run double Gladiator. However, or double Gladiator Lancer, sorry. However, if you assume enemies have other difficult to deal with units, like elite infantry, then arguably any of the other choices are possibly better, right? The Lancer will kill enemy armor, but it's super unoptimal if you're trying to kill Terminators, right? The most Terminators it could ever kill a turn is 2. The Predator Destructor, I think, could kill 8 Terminators because it has 2 las cannons and 6 autocannon shots. So, not to say that Blood Angels can't kill Terminators, but I guess, like, just sometimes when you're building your list, you don't know what you're going to come up against. If you come up against, like, Green Tide Orcs, then 2 las cannon shots or 2 laser destroyer shots from the Lancer isn't going to be so efficient. But you know what? Like 2d6 plus blast, crack missiles, and then 2 more las cannons on top from the Ballistus dreadnought is actually going to be decent, right? So the Lancer is great, and it sort of lets you do that like bare minimum 320 points. You have some long range threat, but isn't always going to be the ideal solution. I think the double Vindicator does the best damage, but having played that a few times, you need to be on point about the Vindicators will need to be close. They'll need to be within 24 inches. I don't think we see many people taking 3 Vindicators. I guess that's 525 points, which is probably a little bit high, but they do provide insane damage. I mean, there could be a list. There could be a Blood Angels list where you run 3 Vindicators. It is possible. I love the Destructors on the Ballistus. I think part of me loves them, though, because they're just so cheap. I've not been playing the combo of running 3 of them mix and match for 390 points yet, this codex. But like the Art of War guy said that he felt this was really good. And when he said that, I was like, damn, I don't have 3 Ballistuses. I only have 2. But I do love the Destructor. So I think maybe in the near future, you might see me play double Ballistus and a single Destructor. I think that could still be very good. Maybe that's where my list needs to evolve. I've got a little bit more time. I'm not going to GT till January. So I've got a little bit of time to figure out a list. But at 390 points, I think it's really hard to argue with what that brings to the table and how much it costs. So let's talk a little bit about a bonus slide, and here is all the numbers. I mean, take a screenshot, save this. If you're a channel member or a patron, remember you could get access to just download all these slides and keep them for yourself. But I put the Land Raider and I put the Repulsor Executioner in here as well. Again, no rerolls factored in. So you can see there that Land Raider actually does really well against like a tactical warsuit. Impulsors, Armigers, Land Raiders, it's really up there. I mean, the Land Raider is actually almost up there with the Vindicator tank. Against the Castellan, I guess it falls away because of the toughness 13, that makes sense. The Land Raider is actually really, really solid here. I have actually said incorrectly at 220 points. There we go, it's 240. The Repulsor Executioner, which is 220, is a bit of a... I mean, it's less damage against the 2 units with the Invan. That would make sense because it has less shots. It's slightly more damage against the Land Raider. It's slightly more damage against the Castellan. I just don't know if I feel like the Executioner, which is 60 points more expensive than the Lancer, for only 1.4 more damage or a couple more damage here, I just can't really get on board with it because I don't know what unit you put inside the Executioner. It only has a transport capacity of 6. Right? And it doesn't really have benefit. Like, the Lancer has some rerolls built in, and I mean, these numbers don't count rerolls built in. So, like, statistically, even though the Lancer has a reroll to hit and wound, which are factored into this number, the Repulsor Executioner doesn't. But I just don't know if I feel like 1.4 damage is worth paying the extra 60 points. I've seen some people on Reddit say that they like the Executioner, but when I played it, I found it quite difficult, and I never found I got value out of it. And I think that they're reliant... Because here's the thing, when you've got 2 shots hitting on 3s, when it really matters, you usually miss one of them. And then that's when the Lancer's 1 free reroll really comes into its own. Or when you've got 2 wound rolls, and, you know, against a Castellan you wound on 3s, again, you fail one of those at a key time, then that's when the Lancer's 1 reroll really comes in. And like I said, these numbers are with the rerolls, these numbers are without. So you would say, like, even without the rerolls, the Repulsor Executioner is a bit better. But I just don't know if I feel like it's 60 points better. If we're trying to keep things cheap, and we're trying to basically save every single point we have for jump infantry, I don't think that the Land Raider or the Repulsor Executioner offer enough for what they cost. I am okay, I think, with the regular Repulsor. It does sort of like very similar damage to the Ballistus dreadnought. 5.6, 5.4, 4.8, 4.4, 4.3, 3.8, 2.8 matching, and then slightly better actually, because the I guess the reroll to wounds is actually helping here against the Castellan Knight. So yeah, it's yeah, well, that's why I didn't really include these. I think we want to keep things cheap overall. I think I've given you the numbers, hopefully, to know exactly what you want to do. So that is it for this week's tactics video. We want to bust tanks. We want to keep it cheap. There's lots of different options. You could almost run any combination of like Ballistus, Gladiator, Vindicator, Predators, Repulsors. I mean, worst case, you could run these other ones, but I think keeping it cheap is more optimal. I think for me, I'm going to try and keep it sub 400 points. Maybe I would go slightly over 400 points if I would do like 2 Ballistus Dreadnoughts and a Repulsor. What was that? 260? That's like 440. I think that's probably as high as I would push it. Maybe the one with the Lancer as well, where it got to like 470. Maybe that's actually okay. But yeah, that is it. That is the goal. Keep it cheap. Pick the firepower that you think that you need. Don't take only one unit, because I think it's always the wrong choice. If you haven't yet watched the video about all the best units in all the best melee units, it's right here. So watch this video now, and then you'll know exactly what to take to augment all these vehicles. If you'd like to support the channel, there's a link in the video description to Patreon. I do really appreciate that. My name has been John. I will see you next week for the tactics video. Thank you ever so much for watching. Have a great weekend, my friends, and we'll be live on Sunday night for our army list show, looking over community submitted army lists. But do not submit me one with a single Lancer, or I literally will be like, what the frack? Why didn't you watch last week's video? I think next week we're going to try and do the Blood Angels tier list for the new codex. So keep an eye out for that. Have a great weekend, guys. By the blood are made strong. Peace.